All right, so I'm going to turn it over now to Danielle and Ken.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen.
Okay.
Everybody see it?
Good.
All good? Okay, go ahead, Danielle.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Good afternoon. Ken, do you want to hit the slide?
Yeah.
My name is Danielle Bonanno. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Executive Director of Inclusive Recovery Athens, as well as the President of Athens Pride and Queer Collective. I am also a person in long-term recovery, and what that means for me is that it has been over 6 years since I broke free from the bondages of trauma and addiction. I have found freedom from my substance use challenges, and my life is no longer limited to destitute, isolation, and vagrancy. I speak out about recovery because it is important for people to know that we all have the right to recover, and that recovery is real and possible for anyone and everyone, including a trans woman who has had my fair share of hardships. I thought that my life as a queer trans person would always be limited. I was wrong. Today, I know what my life is worth. Recovery has given me so many opportunities, but most importantly, it's given me an opportunity to be present for my family, my friends, and most importantly, my community. My recovery journey has been marked by numerous challenges, some of which were intricately tied to my identity as a trans woman. As I walked the path to healing, I realized that recovery wasn't just about breaking free from substance use. It was also about freeing myself from the shackles of societal expectations and discrimination. Coming to terms with my identity as a trans woman was a pivotal moment in my life. I had to confront my own fears, the expectations of others, and the deeply ingrained biases that I had absorbed from society. It was a journey of self-discovery that required immense courage and resilience. In the world of recovery, where acceptance and understanding should be paramount, I often found myself facing additional challenges. Discrimination and prejudice, both explicit and subtle, were present within the recovery community. It was disheartening to encounter resistance from some individuals who couldn't comprehend or accept my gender identity. This personal journey taught me the importance of inclusive peer support. I realized that no one should have to navigate recovery alone, especially not because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. It became abundantly clear that our role as carers was not just to lend an empathetic ear, but to actively work towards creating an environment where every voice was heard and valued. The heart of our work as carers lies in offering hope and understanding. It's about being allies for those in need, providing resources and referrals that are culturally competent, and advocating for change. In my own journey, I found hope in the support of others who understood my challenges, who embraced my identity, and who saw me for who I truly was. Inclusive peer support is not just about saying the right words. It's about creating an environment where individuals can truly be themselves without fear of judgment. It's about acknowledging the realities of discrimination and stigma that LGBTQ peers may have faced, whether within the recovery community or society at large. It's about being allies in their journey, offering support, and actively dismantling barriers to their recovery. Creating inclusive peer support goes beyond our actions. It requires us to confront our own internal biases. We all carry biases shaped by our upbringing, experiences, and society. It's important for us to recognize that these biases can inadvertently impact how we offer support. To truly be effective peers, We must be willing to challenge our preconceived notions and prejudices. This means being open to learning, self-reflection, and embracing cultural humility. Cultural humility is about acknowledging that we don't have all the answers and that we must continually strive to better understand the diverse experiences and identities of those we serve. It's about recognizing that we may never fully grasp the depth of someone else's experiences, but we can listen, we can learn, and we can be empathetic. As we dive into this training today, it's important for us to recognize our privilege. Privilege is often visible to those who possess it. It's often invisible to those who possess it. It can be as simple as not having to worry about discrimination based on your sexual orientation or gender identity. It's vital that we acknowledge our privilege and use it as a tool for advocacy and change. Recognizing privilege allows us to be better allies and advocates for those who may not share the same advantages. As we dive into today's training, let's carry with us the knowledge that change begins within ourselves. By actively challenging our biases, recognizing our privilege, and embracing cultural humility, we can pave the way for a more inclusive and affirming recovery experience. I want to thank all of y'all for your commitment to this essential work. Today, we're here to discuss equity, address discrimination and stigma, and learn how to embody cultural humility in all aspects of our work. Some topics may be uncomfortable, and that's okay. If you need a moment to recenter or take a breather, please don't hesitate to do so. Self-care is an important part of this process, and taking care of yourself ensures that you can better support others. Before we begin, I'd like to highlight just a few considerations that will help us create a conducive and respectful learning environment for everyone. The first thing is to be respectful. Respect is the cornerstone of our interactions. Let's treat each other with the same dignity and courtesy that we would expect for ourselves. This includes using people's preferred pronouns and names and being mindful of our language. Next, let's keep an open mind today. We're here to learn, and that means being open to new perspectives and ideas. Let's approach this training with curiosity and a willingness to challenge our own assumptions. Next, Vegas rules. What happens in this training stays in this training. We're going to discuss sensitive topics, and it's crucial that we create a safe space where everyone feels comfortable sharing and learning. So confidentiality is key. And oops and ouch, which I think we're all familiar with. We all make mistakes, and that's totally okay. We're all human. If you say something that unintentionally hurts or offends someone, it's okay to say oops and apologize. Also, if someone says something that affects you negatively, it's okay to say ouch and express how you feel. This will help us all learn and grow together. Now I would like to introduce our presenter, Ken Pinion. Ken is a dedicated educator and peer specialist with a passion for making a positive impact in the world of recovery and education. Ken holds a Master of Arts in English and Film Studies from NC State University, and he has a rich history of teaching film and gender studies courses at institutions like NC State, Stony Brook University, and Georgia Southern University. Since 2022, he's been an integral part of Georgia Council for Recovery, serving as an AUD peer recovery coach, and he's always eager to give back by volunteering at statewide recovery community events, including Recovery Month, Atlanta Pride, and the Mobilize Recovery Across Georgia bus tour. So I want to go ahead and just welcome Ken.
Thank you so much, Danielle. What a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing it. You really inspire me. I've got to tell you, I mean it when I say that. Can y'all hear me? Thumbs up if you can hear me. Awesome. My name is Ken Pinion, My pronouns are he, him, and they, them, and I'm a person in long-term recovery. For me, that means it's been over 3 years since the day I decided life really is worth living. Not only has recovery given me my freedom back, but I have peace and joy in my life for once. Because of recovery, I can finally pursue my dreams. I'm not displaced anymore. Today, I have my own apartment, money in the bank, and a full-time job. I have an awesome job with the Georgia Council, a network of supporters who have my back no matter what. And most importantly for me, peace of mind knowing that my mom doesn't have to worry about where I'm at anymore. Today, she can sleep soundly knowing I'm safe and in recovery. I speak out about my recovery because our stories matter. And I know that someone out there somewhere might listen and hear my story, become inspired to take action and make their recovery a reality. Um, Speaking of inspiration, thank you so much for attending our presentation today. I'm inspired by each and every one of you, and I hope that you hear something today that inspires you to take action and be the change. We're going to start today with a quick breakout. I'd like to break everyone out into groups of 3. And for 5 minutes, I want you to talk about with each other, with your group, talk about when you felt safest in the recovery community. Maybe a time in early recovery when you finally felt safe and that you belonged. You'll talk amongst your group about that, and then afterward, we'll have a few people share about their experience. Al, if you don't mind breaking people out into groups.
All right, we've got 13 breakout rooms, guys. When you see it, you are ready to go. There might be one room that has 4. All right, and there we go. We still have about 4 or 5 more people in here if anybody wants to break out. I deliberately did not include the co-hosts.
Yeah, the timer
Looks
going.
like we have 3 more people. I'm going to set a timer for 4 minutes and then close the room. It takes a minute for it to close.
Okay.
So, Kenneth, is there a time at which you want me to try to make sure that you're in the second breakout room? Just looking at how much time you might need after that breakout to cover the stuff that comes after it.
I think we might be okay. A lot of the early slides in our presentation are deliberately pretty brief.
Okay.
So the statistics ones I'll fly through. And I may, given the time, I may just go ahead and rather than make the next slide interactive, I might just go ahead and cover the material.
Okay.
Because I want to make sure we have time for that next breakout for sure.
Did it put Danielle in a room?
Did it? It did. She's in a room with Amanda.
Okay.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm
So,
listening as I pack stuff.
when it say not joined, that meant that they just not there.
They have not clicked on the button to go into a breakout room.
Gotcha. I see Don McLaughlin said earlier that he was having computer problems.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see that?
And that
I
leaves
see
Bruce
that.
and Lindsay. And I don't know if Gene is a co-host or not. He is not.
Okay.
So.
Okay. I was just asking.
We are good.
Okay.
And we're probably just going to have a few people share, depending on how long the first share is, right? So
You can kind of direct them to make it short, right?
Yeah. The simple question is, what does safety look like to you? Tell me what you talked about. to get the ideas flowing a little bit.
A lot of people came.
Yeah, I did. How many attendees do we have?
I counted 45.
Okay.
Can we make Danielle a co-host after this breakout? So
Yes,
that
absolutely. That was a mistake on my part.
no worries.
She wasn't here at the point where I was making co-hosts.
No worries. You can, well, send her a private message and just let her know. Go ahead and crack my next LaCroix open.
I can't message into the breakout rooms.
No worries.
I'll let her know when she comes back. Ken, is that a timer on your screen?
Yeah, it is. You see it?
Yes.
Oh, I'm surprised. Ah, yeah, it was for me to like kind of see it just in case like I had to run to the bathroom or something during one of these.
I got you.
Yeah, I give myself like an idea. I'm gonna close it out though. Let's see. Right here. Is it gone?
It is.
Awesome. You don't see the breakout room window in front of the screen, do you?
I see it on mine. I've got it pulled up. I don't. So I'm going to close the rooms, and that will give them a minute to come back.
All right.
And that'll be 5 minutes.
Am I okay to hit close the X button on the window here?
There we go. I got it.
All right. Welcome back, everybody.
They are scrolling back in gradually.
Slowly but surely.
Shirley's not here today. No.
Oh no, Shirley.
I'm
Poor Shirley. She didn't get the memo.
Yes. Right. See that we have 39 people back in the room. Welcome back, everyone.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Is that everybody's back so far? Let me know.
We're at 42. I can't see if there are still any people in there, but I think we are ready to go.
Okay, okay. Well, I'd like for a few people to share about their experience in the breakout rooms if somebody wants to share on what safety looks like to them. Does anybody want to share? I'd love to hear it.
Stephanie Primrose have her hand raised.
Come on, Stephanie. Come on with it.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I was sharing in the breakout room. I guess the safest that I felt was when I went to Right Side Up 10 years ago. I had been living real reckless, and in and out and up and down and all around. And I think I felt the most safest then because I had a place to sleep, I had food, I didn't have to do the unthinkable just to stay there. I didn't have to look over my shoulder. It was like I finally found some peace away from all the chaos and the abuse and all that stuff. So I think I felt the most safest then. And I think that kind of catapulted my recovery because I felt safe.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you so much. That's beautiful. That reminds me of my own experience too. Safety really is key in early recovery. Having a conducive environment where we feel safe and at ease, that we can finally be ourselves. Shatana, you had your hand up?
Yes, hi, I'm Shatana. I think the safe, I'm glad to be here, and thank you everybody for being here. I think the safest that what struck me while I was in the breakout room, actually, because I thought of something else, but it just came to me. This was when I lived in Italy for 30 years, and I got sober in Italy on online meetings, and I met all these people virtually, even, you know, not even in person ever. And they came with me on the airplane. They came with me. They helped me. They helped me pack in Italy. They came with me to come to a place where I didn't have a job, didn't have a car, didn't have a stable place to live, didn't have much money. And I'm saying that metaphorically. They came with me metaphorically. They were there for me, you know, and they loved me through it. And that really, really felt safe for me. And I've never felt that way. I had never felt that way before. And now I'm on the other end of that in my own place, similar to what Ken said earlier. I have my own place. I have a full-time job. I have a car. I have a salary, you know, all of those things. And I'm continuing to feel safe. And now all I want to do is give back because what was so freely given to me. But I'd say the safest the safest I felt and what really hit me was when I went through that major transition of leaving one life after 30 years and moving into a brand new one, unknown life. Thank you.
With the support of the people around you. I love that. I love that for you. We got time for one more. Thank you, Shatana. Jessica, you were next in line with your hand up.
Hey, y'all. Thank y'all for being here today. And I'm really excited about this training today. But the time that I felt safest was when I discovered Mosaic Place. It's an RCO in Northwest Georgia in Cedar Town in Polk County. And in my 20 years of recovery, I have never felt like I could share my past with anyone, whether that be what happened to me or what I did or what I had experienced. And in a peer environment, I was accepted no matter what. And it gave me the space to continue healing and just really heal. And I know I've heard a little bit different between, you know, the physical safety and the emotional safety. When I think about safety, for me, it's an emotional thing. And just having that opportunity to share whatever I need to and be accepted and not judged, and having my peers walk alongside me through that healing process.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Feeling heard and understood, accepted and loved. Those are things that helped me thrive in my recovery and still to this day. And it makes me feel good knowing I'm not alone. Thank you, Jessica. And thank you, everybody who shared. I'm going to move to the next slide where we're going to talk. We might, throughout this presentation, talk about some things that you might recognize from your CARES training. Could I have somebody read this slide for me, if you don't mind? Somebody can just, you don't have to raise your hand, just unmute and go ahead and do the reading for me.
Equality versus equity. Equality means each individual or group of people is given the same resources or opportunities. Equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome.
Thank you so much, Monica. Equality and equity get mixed up quite a lot. And sometimes it's hard because they sound so similar, it's hard to make the distinction. So I'd like to start today first by reading a quote from the National Strategy on Gender Equity and Equality. It's published recently by the White House in Washington, D.C., and it begins like this. Gender equity and equality are imperative to strengthening communities, economies, and nations. We envision a world where every person has equal opportunity, where their safety and security are guaranteed, and where they are treated equitably and fairly at home and their schools, workplaces, and communities. So equality is something that people fought for, and some communities are still fighting for to this day, but under the 14th Amendment and under a lot of protections, thankfully most communities within the country have a sense of equality where we're protected by the law against discrimination, or we should be. But not everybody needs the same resources or the exact same things in order to get that equal viewpoint. You see that illustration right there to the right. See the people, they're on the boxes, but the guy in the middle, whoever's in the middle, he can't really quite see, right? And then you have a little guy right there. He can't see at all because the fence and the barrier's there. But with equity, what equity recognizes is that there's different resources and people need to have different needs in order to achieve that sense of equality and to have that equal outcome. I mean, the definition of equality is the state of being equal. And many of us need different resources or a different approach in order to have that equality. For the most part, when we remove those barriers, what we then have is justice, true equality, right? And a justice that simultaneously recognizes and celebrates difference. There's nothing wrong with difference. We should celebrate it because we're unique in our own skin. I know I am, and everybody else in this room is too. The queer community is also very unique and very colorful group of people. We are some of the most resilient people you'll meet. Queer people come in all shapes and sizes, all genders, all sexualities, and queer people can be white, they can be black, they can be any skin color, right? We are a people of a very diverse community. And historically speaking, queer and trans people have dealt with quite a lot of oppression and violence, and still to this day. The reality of queer life is sometimes harsh. I'm gonna move to the next slide and cover some of the realities, but before I do that, the other day I was reflecting on how different life was 20 years ago as a queer person compared to today. Like from 2003 to 2023, a lot has changed for the queer community, but there's still a lot of violence in the world, and there's still a lot of things that people are challenged with. So let's look over some of it. For instance, did you know that an estimated 30% of the US queer community misuses substances? That's compared to the national population, just the general population of the United States. Or that trans people are 2.5 times more likely to use drugs and alcohol as coping mechanisms. These pictures are from Atlanta Pride, by the way, just this weekend at the Pride Parade. So another reality is that 85% of community advocates reported working with someone who'd been denied services based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. It's astonishing to think that someone would be turned away or told no for a basic health need. Or that 70% of trans participants in that exact same study had been not only told no or declined services, but had then been discriminated against by a clinician. Or that trans people 16 years and older experience physical and sexual assault over 4 times more often than cisgender people do. And I'm gonna cover some of this terminology as we go through this presentation. Some of it may be something you haven't heard of, and we're gonna break it down to come up with some definitions for you. In 2017 to 2018, trans people experienced 86.2 victimizations per 1,000 people, compared to the 21.7 victimizations per 1,000 people for cisgender people. So it's, again, 4 times more likely to experience violence as a trans person in the US currently. In 2020, it was a hard year. Mass media called attention to the increase of murders of transgender women of color. I'm sure if you watched the news that year, you might have seen, and I remember watching the news almost every day. I'd see another face of a trans woman who had been murdered. The following year, there had been 47 reported accounts of trans people senselessly murdered in this country. And that's just reported. I'm certain there were probably more unreported, but there's no data proving that. Our goal in showcasing this data, these statistics, is to portray the reality of what it looks like to be queer, to be trans, and to survive in a world that's historically condemned queer people merely for existing. I, like a lot of people, await a day where queer people are on the front lines of the news, not for their deaths, but instead for their achievements, instead of a celebration of their life still living, for the accomplishments that they've made, and for the things that they've done, not for the struggles that they have. Moving forward, I want to talk about another thing from CARES that you might recognize. Somebody in the chat, go ahead and tell me what is implicit bias? Just a rundown in the chat if anybody wants to throw it in there. And Al will read them out for us. Anybody,
Yes, I will.
Anybody remember what implicit bias is? Just a running guess.
There are biases that we have that sometimes we're not even conscious of, but biases that come from our families, the way we were socialized, the media, history, and things like that.
Yeah, good answer, Reginald. Thank you. Spot on.
So Ken, Sylvia Beam says it's unintentional assumption.
Intentional assumption.
Mary Rogers says it's a bias that we don't know we have or that we don't recognize. Larnie McCarver says it's unintentional judgment. Christina Brooks says bias that isn't stated but implied by behavior, body language, or other ways.
Awesome. Good stuff. All of that's spot on, right? When we talk about implicit bias, we talk about all of those things. And what it does refer to is, just like everyone said, is the attitudes, prejudices, and judgments that we unconsciously hold about people or groups. And by the way, if I get sidetracked or totally squirrel out throughout the presentation, I live with ADHD, throw a squirrel in the chat. And Al will read it out and let me know. So with implicit bias, this can even include, like someone else shared on, assumptions and stereotypes about different communities. One example for gender diverse and queer people is, I've heard it before, is that that those people must have been sexually abused as children. That's why they're that way. Or the misassumption that there's only male and female, and that we're only the anatomy that we're born with. These types of assumptions for queer people come with a lot of risks. And when others make assumptions about queer people as being unacceptable in society, those people are then at risk for a lot of things. I mean, including discrimination and harassment. We've seen this crop up for when trans people don't have their chosen name or their gender identity recognized by the state, or when trans or queer people are denied basic access to healthcare simply for who they are. Like other historically oppressed communities, implicit bias adversely affects the LGBTQ community due to increased stigma, right? We feel like we can't talk about it or it can't be talked about, that it should be shunned, we can just ignore the problem, or marginalization, like being denied basic rights like healthcare, basic health needs, or discrimination, right? When we're treated less favorably simply because of who we are, because of our sexual orientation or our gender identity, which therefore causes discrimination tends to lead to violence and harassment. We see that a lot in even the recovery community, unfortunately. I was witness to it in the sober living that I was at. Queer people face significant stigma and discrimination, and we believe that this, combined with the scarcity of queer affirming programs, recovery programs that is, makes access to recovery support services more difficult. A lot of queer people fear judgment, rejection, or discrimination in a recovery setting. And that fear can deter someone from seeking help or feeling comfortable in a traditional recovery setting. And when we talk about inclusive programs, what we mean by inclusive peer support or inclusive programs is one that meets the needs of all people, including LGBTQ people. From my perspective, this might include gender expansive housing. Does anybody have a guess on what that might look like? Feel free to take yourself off mic and share if you'd like.
Housing where you can have people who are trans, who are whatever the gender preference, even if it is non-binary, so that it will fit and have policies and recognition that there's a wide variety of choices that people have and be non-discriminatory.
Great. Excellent. Thank you, Diane. Gender expansive housing is something that exists in only few programs that I know of in the state of Georgia. And what that looks like is being able, just like Diane covered, being able to enter into a program without it being determined where you go because of your genitals or your genitalia, what's on your body. Oftentimes, trans people, when entering a program, if a trans woman has not had bottom surgery or top surgery or does not pass, sometimes they are told that they are supposed to go to the men's side of the program, which not only sets someone up for violence, but it also makes recovery really challenging. Because if in recovery, safety is as important as we know it is, how are we supposed to feel safe if we're not where we really want to and need to be? In addition to gender expansive housing, one might be able to find, say, something like LGBTQ focused peer support. In my experience in early recovery, I went to a traditional sober living. I was one of few of someone like me. But I'm a non-binary person, and I identify as queer. And I was surprised to know that the program director at my program is he was gay, and he's an older gay man. He and I are friends to this day, and he took me under his wing. And at first he had trouble kind of like adjusting to my personality because I'm very colorful, and then we found our vibe, you know, like as friends. And I look up to him, and today he looks up to me. And it's this mutually beneficial relationship. And that's what I mean by queer mentoring. Someone with that lived experience that we know as peers is so fulfilling and so important and helps to enrich our recovery experience. To know that it's possible, to see it in someone else that's been there before, that really gets it. In addition to that, we do feel that programs, an inclusive recovery program would also stand up against discrimination. I can't tell you how many times in my own experience I've seen people use slurs about people, racist slurs or homophobic or transphobic language about someone, either to their face or behind their back. And these days I stand up. I still do. There was a time when I did not, but to stand up, there was a time I didn't because of fear and because I felt like I couldn't. But these days I do, because everyone deserves a fighting chance. And when we put somebody down and call them a name and make them feel like an other, they feel ostracized, like I did all my life. And it's important for programs to stand up against discrimination and say that it's not okay, and even place it into policy, right? Put it in even further in the guidelines that that's grounds for expulsion. In addition to that, meeting local needs, because as we know, who a raise of hands, who works for an RCO that's in the chat? Just raise your hand. I see Diane's hand on the screen. Anybody else? Raise of hand who works for an RCO? Brian? I don't know how to raise my hand, so I'll do it in the video.
And Ken, just to give you a time check, you're just a little over halfway through. It's 12:19.
Got it. So we've got a few people who get it. And when I asked you to raise your hands, right, I know that a lot of the recovery community organizations have to meet local needs, right? But it's also true, right? Because one area of Georgia doesn't necessarily have the same needs. Say Atlanta may not have, the people of Atlanta may not have the same needs as those in Lithonia or in Vidalia, right? The same thing can be said for queer and trans populations within different regions of the state or in the country. There may be different needs for displaced people. In Atlanta, there's a disproportionate amount of trans women who live on the streets, who need housing. And thankfully, there's the Trans Housing Coalition, but there ought to be more programs. And in addition to that, obviously, respecting someone's safety, because under the queer umbrella of queer identity, which you'll see soon, there's also questioning, right? People who aren't out yet, or trans people that do not want to disclose, and that's okay. No one should be outed, and programs should respect that. We've covered some of the safety concerns, right? Honestly, I included this slide so you could see this really cool graphic, but I love what it says. It is revolutionary for any trans person to choose to be seen and visible in a world that tells us we should not exist. That's from Laverne Cox, if anybody's seen Orange is the New Black. I got to meet her in person one time. She's awesome, so cool. We've covered some of that, so we're going to move on to some definitions, right? Because I've said the word queer, and you might be wondering why I keep using the word queer. At one point, queer was a derogatory term for gay people, but ever since the 90s, honestly, since the 70s and protests in the 60s and 70s, the word has been slowly and gradually repurposed as an umbrella term for the LGBTQ community. And reclaiming a word can be messy, right? The word itself, queer, holds both pain and empowerment. I remember even in the early 2000s when high school bullies would call me queer with threats of violence. So like any reclaimed word, apologies, I'm going to drink some water. Like any reclaimed word, it can still be used as a pejorative, right? Something that's offensive, that's supposed to put people down. But the reclamation of the word queer goes as far back as the 1969 Stonewall riots, with t-shirts that read, "We're here, we're queer, get used to it." And when used with respect and love, queer carries a different connotation. It refers to the diverseness of sexualities and gender identities beyond the cisgender and heterosexual norm. And so breaking it down, when we look at the umbrella, you see there's queer as the umbrella term, and then LGB, which means lesbian, gay, and bisexual. those are sexualities, right? Sexual orientation. But then T and Q, and then plus, which could be trans, queer, or questioning, A for asexual, I for intersex. Those are gender identities, or a sex assigned at birth, because intersex isn't yet on like legal stuff, but you'll see a word that it'll be on the say this not that, that typically is used as a slur. Usually what happens when someone's intersex is that they're identified as whatever the doctor or clinician determines is closest to what it looks like. When we talk about gender, we talk about many things. I mean, we could spend a whole college semester going over gender. I mean, I used to teach gender studies. But I've included this diagram for your information when you get the handouts later, right? There will be printouts of the slides. And I found this from the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network. Diagrams like this can be really useful for someone like me who gets confused really easily over words. And I'm just going to cover some of them real quickly here. So sex assigned at birth, I've already kind of covered. That's what the medical community labels you. Usually sex assigned at birth is what's on your birth certificate. It's what the doctors determine we are, usually even before we're born from an ultrasound. And it's determined before we even depart the womb. Then there's gender attribution, which when you see somebody and you look at them and in your mind, you determine that if they're a man or a woman or what they might be, when our perception of someone's gender, whether or not we realize it, that's gender attribution. And when I think about it, we could consider the times in our lives when implicit bias or an assumption has enabled us to mistakenly call someone sir or ma'am and end up wrong. As it's a courtesy, but then we find ourselves making a mistake, and we'll show you how to address a mistake like that going forward, right? We'll go over gendered language here in a bit. Gender expression, on the other hand, that's how somebody chooses to display their gender identity, right? With clothing, hairstyle, body shape. People can use a different voice or alter their voice, right? Whether surgically or not, to help express their gender identity. Facial hair and cosmetic or surgical alterations to the face and body. Some people choose to express their gender identity. However, others cannot for safety reasons or by choice. For instance, I fluctuate. My gender identities, I'm not one who believes in binaries for myself. But I choose to just dress in drag as a boy for work. And that's how I look at it. It's just putting on drag every day. And if you think about it, drag queens express a feminine gender expression for work. Although they may or may not express it in their personal life, right? The other thing in the middle is gender identity. So we've covered everything within society and then I guess some psychology stuff, but then there's gender identity, which is how you identify or see your own gender. Gender identity, ironically enough, is broken down into two binaries. So the first term, which you may have heard of before, is cisgender. So this term goes back to that medical community's perception of our gender identity. Cisgender means being able to identify with the sex you were assigned with at birth. The way this term is used is usually cisgender male or cis male. Alternatively, if someone is identified as female or designated female at birth and still identifies as a female, then they would be cisgender female or cis female. The next is the other side of that binary, right? So on the other hand, there's cisgender and then there's transgender. To be transgender, non-binary, or gender non-conforming means that someone doesn't identify with the sex they were assigned with at birth. So language is constantly evolving, right? And when I was in college, I identified as genderqueer. And that was before the term non-binary was like even a thing. or at least that I knew of. It hadn't become widely known yet. And to be non-binary or genderqueer or gender non-conforming means that your gender identity doesn't fit neatly into the boxes of man or woman. I like to think that gendered language, like gender itself, changes fluidly and naturally over time, right? You know, I say this because in the medical community, the word trans male and trans female are the words trans man and trans female in the medical community, but like in the queer community now, the words trans mask and trans femme, which are alternatives of those words, have cropped up recently to break away that male and female binary. Rather than relying on male or female, they're using trans mask and trans femme, and I like that a lot more personally. We've included the gender unicorn as a way to kind of break down gender, right? So we're not going to go through this, and we don't have enough time to go over this in the presentation, right? But the way the gender unicorn works is if you want to use this or find it online, the way it works is you go down this list, and however you're feeling that day, you just use a pen and like mark on the line. So in gender studies, we consider gender to be a continuum, right? Something that's, some of us believe that it's something that's going and changing over a lifetime. And so someone might do this assignment one day and find that they identify more female, right? But then going forward later in life, that may have changed. Our gender identity can change over the years, and it's important to be able to recognize that. I know mine's constantly evolving. So another way that people identify their gender identity in conversation is through pronouns. Pronouns are, I think, a pretty simple idea, but we're going to go over them just pretty quickly, and you'll even have your own exercise that I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. So trans and gender diverse people use many different terms and pronouns. For many, correct pronoun usage is a critical, respectful, and affirming form of communication that not only builds trust, self-actualization, but also empowerment, right? Pronouns help people feel heard. They help people feel understood, seen, especially when they're affirmed and validated. Who doesn't want to be affirmed and validated, both in life, but also in recovery? And when we talk about pronouns, what we mean is this. So they're broken down into 3 different categories, right? Masculine, feminine, and neutral. Masculine pronouns, otherwise known as typical male pronouns, are he, him, and his, whereas feminine pronouns are she, her, and hers. Then there's also the neutral pronouns, which oftentimes are used by non-binary people, and that's they, them, and theirs. And sometimes people just use one set of pronouns, right? If they identify as male, right, or trans or cis male, they'll use he, him, his. But some of us adopt a couple sets, right? So for instance, because I was assigned male at birth, but I identify as non-binary, and I have no plans on transitioning, I use he, him, his, and they, them, theirs, because those are the ones that make sense to me. And I don't care, personally, for me, I don't care which one is used. But it's important that people's pronouns are, when someone identifies using he and him, that it's respected that we use he and him, right? Because when we misgender somebody, when we're working with someone and we misgender somebody, that can cause a lot of distress. Misgendering is using the wrong pronoun to describe someone. It can cause distress because not only is their gender identity not validated, but it also makes someone feel disrespected. And on top of that, what it does just sociologically is that it can cause a lot of safety risks for people. I read the other day, social affirmation of gender, and I've got this in the the resource list at the end of the slide so you can find it for yourself. That social affirmation of gender is significantly associated with better health outcomes, greater perceived safety in public settings, higher self-esteem, less depressive symptoms, lower suicidal ideation, and a better quality of life among transgender women. So when we talk about pronouns, oftentimes they're dismissed as something trivial, but it's more than that. There's power in identity and power and feeling affirmed. Now, we all make mistakes, right? And just ask. There's no harm in asking someone for their correct name and their pronouns, because we both believe that it's a matter of basic respect. What we mean by that is introducing yourself by your name and by your pronouns, and then asking someone for their name and pronouns, right? An example might be, hi, my name is Ken. I identify as he and they, and I just wanted to introduce myself, and do you mind if we share our name and pronouns with each other? And something like that, especially working with someone of the from the LGBTQ community. I know it would make me feel safe, and the peers that I have worked with, it's made them feel very safe. Because in my work, I have encountered queer and trans peers in the hospital, and it's hard to put to words the level of fear and suspicion that I know so well from having been talked down to by clinicians or looked at a different way all my life. And helping people feel safe and comfortable it's a great way to create that connection that as carers is so important. You know, we do believe that connection is the opposite of addiction, and connection helps us to enrich our relationship with our peers too. So
there's a question in the chat.
We have time for one or two questions, if that's okay.
Jessica Brown wants to know, is it acceptable to use they, them, theirs when a person's gender identity is unknown?
Well, good question. It's Jessica, right? Jessica, so now we're going to do a breakout and we'll talk about this a little bit, right? We're going to do a breakout where you'll ask each other your name and pronouns. You'll start by introducing yourself, though. The most important thing, I think, rather than making an assumption about someone's gender identity or their pronouns, is to just ask. There's no harm in asking, but it's more courteous if we introduce ourselves by our name and our pronouns and then ask somebody if it's okay, right? So for an example, let's do a breakout, and we're going to break everybody out into groups of 3 again. And if you will, use this time to practice asking each other your name and preferred gender pronouns. Afterward, we'll talk about how it went and what it was like, right? But if we'll go ahead, Al, and break everybody up into groups.
All right, here we go. We have 13 groups with 3 each. And you are invited. And I see some people going. Thank you all. Just click on the button so that it lets you in.
Do we have any other questions in the chat built up yet?
There weren't a large number of other questions.
Okay, there will be time at the end to have a key. We're going to use Danielle's going to go over a slide that basically is our Q&A.
Okay.
What was it like? What will you use? What will you learn? What did you learn?
Danielle, are you speaking to us?
Yes, I am. Okay, so I see we're at this breakout. So now we're about to go on to slide 30, Ken?
Yeah, and so we're we are going to go through the next 3 slides, and I'm going to just tell folks that we are going to include the say this, not that, and the how do you support with the 2 access point slides as resources to be timely, because we only have 22 minutes left, and I want to make sure that there's enough time for
I
discussion.
agree.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Alrighty. Yeah, I'll fly through these, and then we'll just kind of cover the cute little illustrated slides and stuff briefly.
Right.
All good so far?
It's gone very well. I'm glad that this presentation ended up working out for us.
I
It's
agree.
gone very well.
It's
Yeah.
well
You're doing
attended.
an amazing job.
Oh, thank you so much.
Nice to take the back seat in this for once.
So at the very end, I do come back on and say my little piece, right? Or
Correct.
am I gonna, okay, if we have time to do that, right?
Oh,
We will have time. We'll have
yeah,
time.
we'll have time. These next few slides are so short. I'm gonna basically
Yeah, and it's just
read
like a
from-
minute.
Yeah.
It's just to thank everybody and just a minute. And
Yeah.
so do Al, you don't need me to say anything else about the certificates because we talked about them at the beginning. Just send your
I would repeat
information.
it. I would repeat it,
Okay. All right.
especially that they may not get their certificates until next week.
Cool beans. Okay. And they will get the presentation of the slides, correct?
Correct.
Ken and Danielle.
Yeah. So I included the black and white handout with the 3 slides. I hope that they're able to be read. I think the access point one I might need to print those as separate PDFs.
It does complicate things to add extra PDFs to be sent out.
So we'll just just send out the black and white one.
I think that's fine.
What I'll
They have
do.
our information if they are missing something or need more information, we can always send them a PDF of it individually.
True.
All right, I'm going to close the room. It'll take a minute for it to close on its own, but I'll go ahead and initiate that process. We're at 12:40, so we have 20 minutes.
Because they do have y'all information, Danielle and Ken. So if they wanted to reach out to you, if they had some issues reading it or something, they could send you an email or something.
Yeah, we really only probably have time for 1, maybe 2 people to share briefly on what it was like.
Okay.
So we'll be quick with it.
Sorry, y'all, my screen's out. I've been changing to green.
Hey, Amanda.
Hey, I'm not doing this on purpose, but there's something going on with I think it's the C charger, but now I have no screen. And then
we know
it's a green screen, so I apologize. I'm here.
Okay. Al, let me know when
All right, we have 13 people who are back. So that number will continue to rise. The room will, now we have 40, 41, 42 people back. I think it's okay to go, Ken.
Hey, all right, y'all.
There's one thing to read from the chat. George answered the question. He said, for me, they refers to me and the many elders and ancients who are with and support me today, which I think is really beautiful.
I love that. And gender identity really is unique to the individual. And that speaks to the core of it. I love that. All right, everybody. Welcome back. I'm so glad you're here. I want to hear about it. What was it like to introduce each other by both name and pronoun and to exchange it? Feel free to unmute. We're going to have 1 or 2 people share on it.
This is Chantel.
Hey, Chantel.
Hey there. So it seemed fun, I mean, like normal and comfortable because we're in this particular setting. But we were also able to talk about how it can be, you know, what some of our assumptions may be when we're not in this particular setting, and also recognizing that, you know, things can change on a daily basis. So being prepared for that, or trying to better understand that without being uncomfortable, and being comfortable when we are with other people. And it seems like consensus is to say it ourselves first, and usually it'll be reciprocated. Was a good point that somebody brought up in our group.
I love that. And I love to hear that you embraced the uncomfortable and dove in. I think that the most important thing is that when we're exchanging name and pronouns with queer or trans peers, that we normalize it so that it becomes a thing, right? And obviously, depending on the situation, reading the room too is really important. There might be a situation where someone may not want to disclose, and that's okay. And we don't want to disclose somebody for them or out them. Anybody else? Thank you, Chantel.
This is Kayla.
Hey,
I
Kayla.
don't want to sound like an ignorant person. This is good. Believe me, it's very helpful. And I need to practice. That's the bottom line, because there's so much going on with the world and everything. Just like when I was learning about the CARE, substance abuse disorder, and things like that. We haven't met any peers yet. And this is something beyond the peers, as you know. But there's a learning curve for me, and so I'm embracing this. I am so grateful. Very important.
Thank you, Kayla, and I'm glad to hear that you're embracing it. That's important. It's important that we embrace difference and resilience. And I'd love for more people to share, but I think we're kind of close to time. We're gonna move to the. Thank you both for sharing, Chantel and Kayla, and thank you all for participating in the exercise. Just remember, we all make mistakes. It's okay. We're human. I always have to remind my peers of that. And if you slip up, apologize. That's it. Try to avoid being defensive. Own it. Accountability comes with self-accountability is really important, right? And it might look like something like this. Hi, everyone. This is Nico. He's a new friend of mine. I mean, they're a new friend of mine. Sorry, Nico. No worries. Thanks. And owning it, right? By inadvertently misgendering, they owned it, called it out, apologized, and it wasn't a big deal. Getting a peer's gender right is on you. It's not the trans or gender non-conforming peer's job. We don't make assumptions around here about people. So try not to make assumptions about a peer's gender identity, because you don't know until you ask. The only way we can make a difference is by taking action. And I know that from my experience. So I had to start doing something different. So we've also, going forward, there's with language, we talk about, y'all remember Say This, Not That from the CARES training? I love this, right? And you remember, this was adapted from Riley Kirkpatrick of Access Point of Georgia. Y'all familiar with Riley? Shout out to Riley. What a cool guy. He is so inspiring to me. And I love everything he has to say in the CARES training about MAT. Important part of my recovery. So when I talked about intersex, I won't cover all these, but when I talked about intersex, what we can avoid saying is the word hermaphrodite. And that's a slang, old word that's used from like in the 50s, I don't know how long, but intersex is like the new adopted word. And instead of saying born male, we can use assigned male at birth or assigned female at birth. Instead of using a trans peer's dead name, which is the name that was chosen for them at birth, we would instead use the peer's chosen name and only that name. So we'll include this for your purview later, in addition to some suggestions, right, for how we can affirm, specifically how as peer specialists or even people who work in the recovery community can best support trans and gender non-conforming peers. What I'm going to do too is I'm going to click back right here. If anybody wants to take a picture, I'll give you about 10 seconds. I'm counting in my mind right now. This might be a squirrel moment.
Hey, Ken, are you going to be able to share the slide presentation?
Yeah. So the slides are being shared. Well, the slides are being shared in a miniature form. But if you need any information, Danielle and I have included our contact info at the last page.
Great.
And then feel free to take a picture of this one as well.
Yeah, we'll be sending out the slides as an attachment along with your certificate.
Excellent.
Awesome. I think we're all good. And, you know, I guess the last thing I really want to talk about with everybody, and we'll spend maybe like 3 minutes, right, talking about this. We're going to do this not as a breakout, but just as a brief discussion, right? Like the question is, how can you affirm your peers? Affirmation can look different for everybody and their individual needs and the setting that you're in, right? Or that what someone's going through. But just as a discussion starter, maybe a few minutes, anybody want to share on how they can affirm their peers?
What do you mean by affirm their peers, please?
Well, affirmation is when someone feels validated. To validate somebody, that they feel heard and understood.
Ken, we can see your little timer on the screen right now.
Oh, yeah.
Just to let you know.
That's okay.
So would that be like, would that be like if somebody introduces themselves and I'm assuming this is specific to how they identify, and then they say what their preferred pronouns are, having, replying back saying, thank you so much for sharing or for letting us know?
Yeah. So specifically when we talk about trans and gender nonconforming peers or queer peers, right? That would be one way, right? Is both hearing somebody out on their pronouns and validating. That's great. That's a good example. Absolutely. And even more generally, what are some ways that you affirm your peers in your work? Anybody can share.
Yeah, for me personally, I think the best way, maybe not the best way, but my way, the way I handle that to make those peers feel validated is once I find out their pronouns, I acknowledge it, acknowledge who they are and who they identify as, and I just move on. After that point, we start to focus on what the issues in recovery or in life are. I don't spend an inordinate amount of time around that. I just validate them and let them know that okay, I acknowledge and respect your pronouns. So now you're just like anybody else.
Awesome. And to feel a part of, that allows someone to feel a part of. And on the same token, when say someone is disrespecting that person, although you are respecting them and have already validating them, on top of validating them at the start, being able to stand up for them and when they feel that they can't stand up for themselves. That's one of the beautiful things about peer support, is that we're able to be the voice for people who feel like they don't or didn't have a voice at one point.
Ken, we have a lot of good stuff in the chat. Would you like me to read that?
Yeah. We got about a minute.
So Ginger talks about I attempt to create an atmosphere of acceptance and representation in my physical space. George says to talk about observed strengths and challenges. Danielle says a really good way to do it is asking people's pronouns and then using them, which I think is really good because you can ask and then never get around to actually putting it into practice.
Absolutely.
Brian, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that to make sure that when you hear something, whether you're in the presence of your friends that are and are that are LGBTQ or not, when you see something or you hear something that isn't right, that we're able to stand up for them and try to empathize with them about certain things, you know, just like I would empathize with people that are in active addiction or still using drugs, or that are in recovery, like my peers that I work with. So like when I saw that slide a couple of slides ago about what we should try to say and avoid saying, I cringed when I saw that third one and it gets me emotional to think that anybody would be called something less than human and made to feel that way. And so I want to stand up for others that sometimes may not have that voice or opportunity to stand up for themselves.
Thank you for being an ally. That's what it looks like. And I really appreciate everybody's shares and Brian, everybody, thank you so much, because I feel really empowered by it, to be honest. And Danielle, I just want to thank everybody for their time. Danielle's going to take over from here, but y'all are amazing, resilient, and brilliant people, and I just want you to keep on shining. Okay, Danielle, take the floor.
Well, all right. Well, thank you so much, Ken. That was amazing. I really appreciate all you put into helping us get this training going to actually get it to happen. This has been a really amazing experience. So thank you. I just want to take a second to recap everything that we talked about today, just real quickly. One thing we talked about was educating yourself and others. Make sure you continue to seek out educational opportunities after this training. This is just a basic intro into this. Continuing to educate yourself, continuing to learn, and continuing to stay with the current times. That's extremely important. Also, remember, we can show support with small gestures, something as small as including your pronouns in your email signature, or putting a pride flag up in your office, or asking people's pronouns. Those are small gestures that show people that you're a safe person and that also show people that you're an ally. We've talked extensively about using current names and people's preferred pronouns. We definitely want to do that. We definitely want to start every interaction with anybody we meet with an introduction and sharing our pronouns. That lets people know that you are a safe person for that person to come out to share that part of themselves with you. Also, we want to respect people's privacy. If somebody comes out to you as trans, or somebody comes out to you and tells you that they're gay, let's not share that information with anybody else. That is that individual's story to share, and we don't want to take that from them. Also, taking action. This is a real volatile time for the LGBTQ community. Make sure you're keeping yourself informed. I know we have elections coming up. We want to make sure we're doing things to protect this community. And if we are allies, we want to make sure we are making decisions for our communities, and for the people that we love that are informed. There's a saying that I heard, if you aren't getting hit with the same bricks as LGBTQ plus individuals, then you aren't standing close enough. We are living in times where it is important for our allies to speak out on our behalf, to fight for us, to let everybody know that they stand with us. And the last and most important thing anybody can do is to listen to the voices of LGBTQ plus people. LGBTQ plus individuals can tell you firsthand what their needs are, what they need, what's important to them, and how you can keep them safe. All that being said, Ken, there we go. We just want to talk briefly for just a few minutes. We have about 3 minutes left, but we want to talk about what did you like? What did you learn? What did you use? And I'm not sure how we want to do this. I'm not sure if people want to raise their hands. We can have a couple people share. I think that would be really helpful for me and Ken just moving forward to know, what did you like about today? What did you learn and what will you use? Does anybody want to share?
We always want to improve.
I would have to say, my name's Leanne, and my pronouns are they and them. What did I like is actually being around people, and I feel safe in this. You know, I feel safer than I used to because we have evolved a little bit. And believe it or not, I'm paving a path for the generation coming up behind me, because we, you know, the people before us had to pave that road for I. So I like the fact that we are educating people on pronouns, because I was sitting there, because there's one person at my job that says my pronouns, and you know what, it's so weird, but when you say she or her, you know, I don't really hear you, but when I hear her say them and they, you know, and then she takes up for me whenever I'm not even there. That's what I call, you know, beyond respect, just someone that I know, that I trust to be around. And that's what I've liked, because a lot of people don't know. A lot of people, they'll say, well, I'm from the South. You know, it's yes, ma'am. You want to cringe my soul? Call me ma'am. Like, it cringes me to the fact where I mean, because you're putting me in that female category. And it's hard working in treatment because it's the South, you know? And so that's what I like. And I learned that it's just as important for someone not just to be LGBTQ, but you ask their pronouns as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then and then I will use that as well, because I'm not saying that I thought, but you know, it's important that you show that, because you know, because that's going to be my specialty, is working with LGBTQ plus folks, and you know, along with my hope, strength, and experience. So that's all I have to say about that. Thanks, guys. It's been amazing, and y'all are great.
Thank you, Leanne. Thank you.
So we're at 1 o'clock. I did have one thing I wanted to say. It doesn't cost anything to put your pronouns on your Zoom name. It is automatic. It's a setting in the system. And I don't think anyone's thinking that I am trans or non-binary, but I want people to know that I'm safe for people who are. So I really think that's a good reason to do it, and love to see more people do it.
Thank you. We've included our information here, both our emails and our phone numbers. If you need anything, any questions answered, please reach out. And the references for our presentation are included as well. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thank you.
Yes.
Wonderful.
So we want to take this time just to thank the hosts, Danielle and Ken. You are amazing. The bright and colorful slides and the information was well needed for me. And I love the fact that you explained things the way you did, and you went to topics that, you know, are sometimes uncomfortable to talk about. So we are going to send the slides out. We're going to send the slides with the certificates. And I think Al says it's going to take about a week. Correct, Al?
It can take up to a week. It might be early, but don't worry, you'll get it.
You will get it. Okay. And I just want to remind everybody to save your CEUs to submit them in December. That's going to be very, very important to get your CEUs submitted in September. And we thank you all for coming out today, and we appreciate the support.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much for
Thank
attending.
Hey, y'all did great.
Bye. Thank you.
What's up, Ken?
Thank you. See ya.
See ya. Bye, Chris.
Good to see you.
See you, Ty. Good to see you.
Danielle, can I ask you a
Bye.
question real quick, or do we have to go right this second?
You got a question, Shauna?
For Danielle.
Okay.
Danielle, hi. Yeah, I have a friend here, and anyway, the groups that you have in Athens, he told me about them. See, I'm screwing up already. She told me about them, and she's not in recovery, Is it okay if people not in recovery can come to some of your meetings?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say we exclude anybody, but we do have a very, as a recovery community organization, like it's kind of broad. Like we have trauma survivors, mental health recovery, and substance use recovery.
Okay.
And it just has kind of all just flowed together very well. So I think if they fit into any of those, you know, areas that,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. I'm going to talk to her today about this, about meeting you, because
Absolutely. But also, you know, Athens Pride and Queer Collective has some support groups too. I don't know how old this person is. But we have a trans support group that meets twice a month. They do one in person, one virtual. We also have a youth support group, and we have a parents of LGBTQ youth support group. So
support group is what she wants. The trans support group is what she wants, Danielle.
absolutely. Well, you can email me at Danielle@athenspride.com.
Okay, well, I just took a picture. So it's the one I just took a picture of, correct?
Yeah, you can send me that there too. Yeah, that's fine.
Can I give that to her as well, please?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Okay. Her name is Alana, and she's a dear friend of mine. So I'm going to call her now because, yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. It was really nice finally meet you.
It was nice to meet you too.
Good to see you, Shatana.
Good to see you
Love
guys.
you, girl.
I love you too, Ken.